didn't think I was flying a kite in a thunderstorm. No. I just wanted to get it in out of the rain. Well, but I did fly a kite in a thunderstorm once, though I almost didn't live through the experience. But through that experiment, I did prove, for once and for all, that lightning indeed was electricity. Yes, you know, in the 1750s, when I was experimenting with electricity, I coined the words battery and condenser, and the terms positive and negative for the electrical charges. Oh, I know, there was no real practical use for electricity back then, but Thomas Edison did come along later on and invent an electric light, and that vacuum tube and its filaments has become the basis of electronics. I'm sure you have a hard time thinking about life without electricity or electronics. In my day, when the sun went down, the houses got dark. Oh, sure, you could light a candle or an oil lamp, but it didn't compare with the blaze of light that you can marshal with the flip of a switch. You use electricity to sweep your floors, heat your water, wash your dishes, warm your houses. You cook your food and press your clothing with electricity. And your clocks and even your knives are electric. And electronics have certainly changed the way you live. You know, the majority of Americans get their news, not to mention their entertainment, from television. Virtually every home in the United States has at least one television set, and more than half of those homes are connected to cable. At the beginning of this decade, 61% of the homes in the United States had video cassette recorders. Now, in the last 10 years, the number of television stations increased by 50%. Television has not killed radio, just as FM radio did not kill AM, and radio did not kill newspapers. Local radio advertising accounts for 75% of total advertising revenues and is increasing at a rate greater than any other medium. Most of the activity is in FM radio because of its superior quality. Now, since each station's format is geared to reach a specific type of person, the advertiser can buy a specific station and know that they are getting only the type of person who would be likely to buy their product. The world in your day seems to have an unending thirst for information. You have radio stations with every conceivable format: classical, Christian, news talk, rhythm and blues, rock, and, oh, what was that other one? Yes, radio for insects, an all Beatles station. I read about it. What is that? And what about television? You know, it used to be that radio stations had formats which drew a certain type of audience, but television programs were aimed at different groups. But since there were only a few commercial networks, they tried to reach everybody with a variety of programming. Now, well, with cable television available to more than 80% of the population in the United States, well, there are many different networks, each with their own format, much like radio stations. This is called narrowcasting, rather than broadcasting, trying to reach a narrow but specialized segment of society. There are sports networks, 24-hour news networks, a weather network, a financial network, foreign language networks, Christian networks, movie networks, educational networks, home shopping networks, cultural networks. I get dizzy just thinking about all of it. And about 2% of the people in the United States have satellite dishes on top of their homes or in their backyards, which allow them to pull all of this information down out of the sky from 22,000 miles in space. Imagine, right into their own living rooms. With all this all around you all the time, well, I don't think you fully appreciate the tremendous power you possess because of the sophisticated technology which you can have in your own home. Now, I know you feel it is a mixed blessing because so much of the programming is mediocre or downright harmful. But think of the tremendous miracles which modern technology has brought about. Now, surely they can be powerful tools in the work of God on earth. So how do you, as a local church communication leader, go about using electronic media in your work and not break your church's budget? Now, I hear you. You're saying, I'm having a hard time getting reimbursed for my 35mm film for my camera. How can I use television?
But electronic media may be useful to you in doing promotion within the church as well, as was mentioned in Lesson 5. The photography principles in Lesson 6 also apply to producing a slide program. A simple slide program is much more interesting than a spoken announcement, even if it is not entirely professional. Add a simple recorded soundtrack to your slides and you have a full-fledged production. Naturally, you must have access to some good audio equipment if you are to produce even a simple soundtrack. The home video revolution has provided opportunities which did not exist before for using electronic media for in-church promotion. Many cities have companies which will edit VHS videotapes into a program for low hourly rates. But when you do any kind of media program, you must start with a central idea or theme. You should be able to state what action you want your viewers to take. Are you merely entertaining, or do you want a response? If you want a response, make it clear in the program, usually at the end. Then turn your central idea or theme into a script. The script tells everything which will be said, seen, or heard in the course of the program. The script may also indicate the kind of shot desired. Perhaps you want a wide-angle shot of your church building to be the first thing people see. Or perhaps you'd rather start at the other extreme with a close-up of a flower. The next step is to shoot your slides or video. You don't have to shoot everything in order. That's where editing comes in. Editing is the work of taking all the pieces of your production and putting them in the order you want them, as called for in your script. The pieces will include visuals, that's slides or video, and audio, recorded narration, sound effects, or music. That's where the term audio-visual comes from.
It's important to be consistent in using electronic media to communicate with your community. If you don't have a lot of money, you may not be able to make a big splash, but you may be able to consistently provide your media outlets with news about your church. They will use some of it, but much of it they will not. That's not a reflection on you, and it's not an indication of prejudice against your church. It just means that the news business is a supply and demand business, like a lot of other businesses. On a slow news day, your news release might receive attention it would not receive on a day when there's a major news event, like a plane crash. The secret is to submit something often enough so that you become known to the editors involved and your church will become familiar to the public. So what can you do? The least expensive and easiest way to keep your church before the community is to take advantage of community bulletin boards. Many radio and TV stations have them. Call the stations to find out what their lead time is. How early do they need to have the material from you in order to run it in time for your events? This takes very little time and costs no money, except for a stamp if you mail the material in. Next, submit news releases to the broadcast media as well as the newspaper. We discussed this some in Lesson 3. Use the principles of news writing that we discussed then, but make the release a little shorter and break up any long sentences. Remember, you're writing something that someone will read, probably without having much time to look it over.
At the top of the paper, write for broadcast rather than for release, as you would with a newspaper article. If you have the capability, record an audio cassette interview with someone mentioned in the story so the radio station can use a sound bite if they want to. But a better way is to alert the broadcast station ahead of time and allow them to cover the event themselves. The larger your city is, the bigger your event will have to be for a broadcast station to devote its time and resources to it. But give it a try. On a slow news day, who knows? And it doesn't cost anything. Another way to use radio and television is to sponsor one of the programs produced by the church. Programs like The Voice of Prophecy for radio, and It Is Written, Breath of Life, Ayer Oye Mañana, and Christian Lifestyle Magazine for TV are quality programs which will be appreciated by the broadcast stations in your area. The expense involved will vary widely depending on the population of the area served by the broadcast station and the size of their audience as indicated by ratings. Naturally, you should first ask for public service time, which means you would get the time free. It's not easy to get free time anymore, since there are so many Christian media ministries which are able to pay. After you have made the contact, the program will supply the tapes each week directly to the station. The General Conference and the Adventist Media Center also have 30 and 60-second spots which you can use. Many Union Conference communication departments have access to spots as well. Ask your station if they will run your spots free as public service announcements. You might be surprised how much can be said in 30 seconds. While doctrinal discussions are impossible, you can create a great deal of goodwill and awareness. Spots can be aired over and over at all different times of day and night, so you reach people you would never reach with a weekly program. To produce your own spots, you wouldn't have to buy any equipment. The station could produce the spots for you. Some stations will produce spots free if you are buying time.